Welcome to the Life Rocks podcast. In this podcast, we explore how nature, science, education, and culture can benefit all children and future generations. This is a show for educators, parents, mentors, and anyone interested in making the lives of our children, families, and communities better. So sit back, take a breath, and enjoy the show. And now for your host, Asher Cloran.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Life Rocks podcast. I'm here with Donal Carr. Donal Carr has been a mentor to me in the C.H.E.K program, doing IMS and exercise coach. And he is the director and owner of Place of C.H.E.K, C.H.E.K faculty, C.H.E.K practitioner, holistic lifestyle coach, PPS practitioner, and international speaker, presenter for fitness conventions. Donal's been working in the health professional circuit for over 30 years and has a vast wealth of knowledge, specializing in rehab of the neck, back, shoulder, hip, knee, and has extensive experience working with professional and Olympic athletes. Donal is also the developer of the apprenticeship mentoring program at Place of C.H.E.K. Donal, welcome. Thanks for coming on today.
You're welcome, Ash.
So I first met Donal when I was doing exercise coach in Melbourne at Live Strong Primal Gym, owned by Tanya Carroll, of which I just had a training session with Tanya today. It was very good.
Great.
And yeah, I was blown away, not only with the content of the course, but with Donal's awareness, his skill in everything that he does, and his sense of humor and other things. Been a great mentor to a lot of people, and a lot of people that I've known, including Callum and Jake Stone up on the sunny coast. And yeah, have heard the ripples of your healing practices and exercise practices throughout a lot of people in Australia. So
I feel like the connection thing, Tanya, because Tanya used to be one of my students. So now you're one. So it's like the grandfather now, I feel like, rather than So yeah, that's cool.
I guess when you've been around long enough doing the same thing, you end up being like a big tree that just keeps on giving. So
yeah, it's that ripple effect. Keep paying it forward.
Yeah. And then, so when I got into IMS 2, and that's where they revealed the infant development practices, I remember Donal running me through the lateral cross crawling and the spinal work on the mat. And yeah, I had I had a bit of an emotional kind of inner breakdown. I didn't burst into tears or anything, but I felt extremely stuck and weird. And I knew that there was something deep there. Like I couldn't even go through the movement pattern. So I just froze on the spot. And I thought, this is stuff that everyone needs to know. Fast forward later with Life Rocks, we're really trying to get information out to parents about developmental theory. There's so many pitfalls in the modern world for the modern family that can screw up a child's development, leading to postural issues later on in life and emotional stuff. So I'm interested, when you learned about this stuff, how you started to weave it into your family, because you've got two very talented sons. And yeah, I'm interested to know, when you found out about this stuff, how did you think about it as a family man?
Well, the first instance comes to when I was doing my study. It was kind of like coincidence or whatever you want to call it. But I was reading a book on infant development by Richard A. Schmidt, and it was talking about there's a window of opportunity between 6 months and 18 months when the infant's nervous system is navigating its environment. So it starts to kind of downlay the infrastructure that it'll need for later on tasks. But if it doesn't have the complexity of challenges or risk reward to get them to move, or the environment is not conducive to making the child move, then they miss that gateway to kind of downlay that window. And Josh, my son, was about 6 months. My other son, Ryan, was about 18 months, 2 years. So I'd missed the window for him. But there I had a live specimen ready to experiment. And I've used this many times, and things that we would do and what Schmidt was talking about was then mirrored. And I saw it again in infant development when you looked at Voiter's work or at the DNS Institute in Prague. And he seemed to be the overarching kind of grandfather of this kind of understanding. And then there was other people that branched out now that's kind of using some of their model and blending it with other model. And I think the modern day practitioner has been able to use multifaceted approach and not just get hooked into one. And I think that that's where some of the specialists got so specialized, nobody knew that they even existed. So in my own family, I have a nephew that has CNV, which is something that affects the immune system, and it's like a spasticity. So he was born with a level of spasticity. But because of my C.H.E.K faculty, and I knew Matthew Walden, and I reached out to him, and I found the best clinic in the UK for my nephew to go to. My sister-in-law is a physio that works in hospitals. So she was willing to try something in this realm and went off and did this infant development while the child was young enough, as the system is learning, and reduced the spasticity, and is now graded as a level 1, which is the lowest level of spasticity. He's actually now able to run around and do things that they didn't think that he would be able to do. But that's an example of, at the end extreme, I suppose, where it's being used, but it can be used for everyday child and everyday life to improve their movement function. So going back and rewinding to where did that go with Josh? When Josh was sitting in his pram, I'd hand him stuff with my left hand because everybody else would hand him with his right hand. I would play with his left hand and his foot, and I would do different things where you cross pattern where the nervous system goes, which is pretty much these days, if anybody knew Thomas Meyer's work and the anatomy trains, you kind of like you're tickling along those fascial lines to excite those patterns of muscles to work, or doing tasks or reaches where you get that body to start working on those lateral lines. And when you're talking about the crawling, the homologous or homolateral movements, where they have to learn to wriggle and crawl. But if they miss that environment, say that the floor is not good or hard, then you might have to have a carpet or a cushioned floor to make the child more comfortable to crawl. If your baby is supposed to learn how to crawl, but for some reason it's a hard surface, or they have to be kept, in a little kind of chair or some kind of thing that could slow down their development or miss out on an opportunity to enhance their development, let's say. So I think everybody is born with these opportunities, and that sometimes the environment is either slightly better or not, or people just don't know what are the better environments at different stages of development. There's also a problem if the child kind of skips a stage of development or starts to walk too early and hasn't developed the stability network in the pelvis, the spine. And if they can't sit and hold their own body weight up, but yet there's being promoted to sit up or stand up in some apparatus, then we're starting to put some compensations that hasn't given the earlier stages enough time to learn and organize itself and be successful. So that's why there is so much of this kind of like there's importance to belly time and importance to crawling and reaching. But it's also, there's limits to that stuff as well. There could be challenges already if there's a complication in the birth or something else going on. There is, it's a big topic. But I use Josh as an example, and then he then learned later on to play drums, and friends would throw him balls, and there was various instances in our house where, he'd be very ambidextrous or coordinated on left and right hand, could do the same thing on left and right hand. So I believe that's made a difference. And then from using it clinically then for, I suppose, 25 years now, I've seen a physical difference to when you're working with the high-end athletes, how to improve. And then the experience that you had, Ash, where you have kind of like a physical block because there's kind of like a lock there, like the chakra system behind us, the energy system is blocked. And once you can kind of, sometimes the therapist can help you move through that and just gets the flow and the energy. It's a bit like getting lubrication or the fascia moving. And then once you oscillate it, and it kind of puts it back into that kind of original rhythm or original pattern that humans learned how to walk. So on the mattress is very much like in utero. So that's kind of in the fetal position. So there would be other psychological, mental, emotional things that we could get from a more in-depth paperwork. But in regards to with development issues, it's kind of sometimes if you bring tasks, or it depends on who you're working with an adult, I can bring some logic and some exercises that look like they're a Swiss ball and you're going forward and back, but that's really the crawl pattern we're working on. Prone cobras, we're really working on the extension of homologous, the differentiation between the top and the bottom, which is between 3 and 5 months of development. So these are the development kind of stages. Linda Hartley, Wisdom of the Body Moving, is a great quote or a great book reference. And that gives you an overview of the kind of the principles of kind of what we talk about in the C.H.E.K program, where we have the infant development wheel, which is just the embryological development stages of when a baby goes in utero, in the womb, in liquid, and learns how to twist and wriggle. And then when it comes out, everything from the nervous system, the myelination hasn't happened yet. So it's only from the central core. The branches haven't kind of spread out. So it's
trying to gain control of its limbs.
Yeah. So it doesn't have proper eye and hearing and everything else. It's only the primary sense. And then they start to myelinate after a couple of weeks, and then they get more awareness. So it's like starfish. Its navel radiates out from the spine out. And then they learn how to use upper and lower limbs. And that's when they can start to push their chest off the ground or start to reach and maybe start to crawl on the floor. Some actually get up onto all fours, but then they kind of rock and they're like a bear. They don't know what to do because put one hand forward, they fall over. So then they go back down to the floor and they learn how to kind of leopard crawl and side bend their body. And this is where all these articulated surfaces get kind of friction in the front of the hip. And if they don't,
stimulating that.
Yeah, and they're stimulating the articulation of the joint. If that joint is never put in that position earlier on, that's when the cartilage downlay and the surface material of the articulated joint starts to get the stimulus for the environment to say, okay, well, this person is going to be moving that joint, so let's put that articulated surface there. So if a child doesn't hang out of a tree and doesn't get that range of motion or doesn't sit down and fully squat, a lot of people from my orthopedic screening of their ankles don't have the orthopedic ability to come down. I mean, as a human, you're supposed to be able to squat ass to grass and sit down.
Yeah.
But because they never got in that position when they're younger, they never encouraged the surface of the ankle and the calcaneus to actually have that range of motion. So getting them to do that is actually not physically a good option for that structure now that's been developed that way. They can do it by stretching the connective tissue, which could then cause other problems, but they could get there. But the joint now missed that opportunity because the environment didn't, respond to having that necessary need in their life. It's like putting the wiring in a house and you kind of have it there and then you put it in and then you put the walls up. But if you want to take the wires out now, you got to cut the walls and repaint the walls. It's a hard thing to do. In your body, it's the same kind of thing. When you're originally downlaying the nervous system, the coding, the strategies you're going to need. Well, I need 2 sockets in that room. Well, I need 3 lights in that room. You got to kind of, that's where the body's saying, well, what type of environment does this person species has to navigate? And what we're seeing is that when you don't have those challenges, it's not that they can't be rebooted later on in life. You're just limited. And sometimes there are opportunities that just physically, the way the cartilage in the joint is kind of being molded as those growth plates and end plates start to physically calcify because the baby's bones are all soft and they're growing. Yeah. And the same thing happens later on in puberty. And that's where you have things like Sherman's disease and Oshlater's disease and all sorts of issues with kids that are going through teenage years when they get kind of the growing pains.
Yep.
And the growth plate starts to happen. So as a strength conditioning coach and someone who's worked with teenage athletes from Irish tennis squads to pro athletes, it's very important to understand there are windows of opportunity where you're allowed to work or challenge a young body. And then when the body's going through puberty and those growth plates are under growth and you don't want to load them, you have to know that information. And look, in Australia, there's great qualifications, the Cert 4 in sports science for children, but other places around the world don't have any regulation or any guidance really for children. So they're really at the mercy of some coach, hopefully, or some guy like me that's got kids and is passionate about not destroying anybody else's kids when they train them.
So what are some of the things that can go on in a house to protect this development. Like the modern kind of got this concept of comfort, and it's all pervasive through, like, we create baby furniture and baby cushions and baby chairs and even all the baby clothing and this sort of thing. Like,
I'll come at it from, I mean, obviously I'm a parent. I have two boys, one 20, one 22 now. They've, I suppose, navigated the postural issues or the injuries, all those things pretty well, and health issues or any risks pretty well. So I think one of the things that, you know, I'm not trying to stand up here and say I did it right, because I suppose if you look back, you'd always say in hindsight, you could change things. But I certainly learned a lot of things along the way. And from what I do, from working with as a corrective specialist or someone that deals with people that come in broken, I see what not to do because it ends up with this. Yeah. So I've been looking at what not to do. It sits me in the face every day. So I think the things that I see that challenges later on is really when you have a child that you put the child in like a jolly bouncer, especially in that 3 to 4 month range or 5 or 6 months, when they can't sit up by themselves, or their feet the toes can only touch the bottom. That creates a plantar fascia or an angle in the foot, and that ankle tips the pelvis. So they get very problematic neck and lower back issues later on. Yeah. And it's a bit like fortune telling. It's kind of like there's a possibility, or it increases your odds. But if you then learn how to stabilize your core and do stretching, you can negate some of this. And even Joseph Pilates' work was kind of on the same thing about retraining postural awareness and kinesthetic awareness of where your body is. Very much like a dancer knows where their body is on stage. But most of the dancers that I work with that get injured, when they're not on stage, they kind of hang in their body because they're so tired of always holding their body so correct. So they may know the strategies when they're conscious, but when they're subconscious doing every other task, the old patterns of these infant development glitches can sometimes be seen. And through the courses that you've done, and later on in level 4 and 5, you get into some more in-depth assessments of movement strategies. And when they're crawling, you can do assessments on to see the timing of shoulders and hips, which goes to another later stage of development. And these kind of are the interlinking blocks that sets a child up to be able to successfully walk, hopefully in, you know, that 10 to 12 months or somewhere around that time. Some kids will develop faster. That's not wrong. It's only whether they develop and they skip a stage. And it's not kind of like, oh, my child got walking at 8 months. They're better than the child that worked at 9 months. And that kind of thing, I don't know if it still happens. It used to be a kind of a thing. It was kind of like a little bit of a bragging right. My child is a quick learner. But that's not really the case here. It's like, no, they didn't spend enough time at school kind of thing. They dropped out early. They missed 2 years. They didn't finish the certificate. It's not whether you finish fast and get the certificate. There's experiences to be learned along each stage. So I think if we go back to that when you then see those challenges, we can then go back to some of those infant development exercises that relate to the same development. And lo and behold, they can't do those exercises, but they can do all the others. Like your example, I can do lots of other great exercises, but you got me to do this weird thing. And it's like, I don't know how to do that. Yeah. My body just has blank, no file, no compute.
Yeah.
And that can be other things, but sometimes it is. You never developed the code. You were never put in that development opportunity or environment to learn that strategy. Or you skipped through that strategy and you got by until now someone like me puts you under the microscope and says, oh, well, where do we start? Well, we start at the beginning. If we want to see how well your body moves, we've got to assess from the beginning, from gestation all the way through to walking, and then know where you are now. So the other thing for children at home is chairs. Okay. So you mentioned furniture, and most definitely one of the things that we see in correlation to especially orthopedics, and from studying spinal stuff and research for the last 20 years and being in the industry, chairs are like, in my world, they're evil. Like they are like, these things are killers. I mean, whoever invented the chair had a death wish for the human race. You know, like what the hell? So I think that we got an experience in our life. My wife, yoga instructor, decided to go to India after teaching for about 10 years, lived in an ashram for a while, came back. Our TV room, no more couch, no more living room. We had like a year to 2 year with just a rug and a couple of like yoga blocks and yoga, whatever bolsters, and just sitting on the floor, lying on the floor, and it did the best things for all of our postures.
Yeah.
And you watch a 2-hour movie sitting down in a squat position or lying on the floor, and you're finding different positions. So you find the better positions. But yeah, it was uncomfortable for the beginning. And I got a bit like, what the hell did we throw out the thing for? Where's my comfy seat after a while? But, you know, those things that when we see child postural issues start to come in is correlated to when they have to sit down all day in classrooms in kindies or class 1, class 2. There's a direct correlation to it's now obviously in different schools, and my kids went to a Steiner school and then later on to traditional schools. And so I got to see the blend, and I went through a very Catholic Irish kind of teaching system. So that was very different to the Australian system. It's just like the Australian Steiner system was different. And then we went to Josh then and Ryan transferred to a sports school, which is normal high school. And that was a different experience again. So, you know, I think getting back to the kid stuff and the furniture stuff, though, I would keep them away from little furniture and sitting down as much as possible. I would encourage them to, you know, lie, change position, get them up and moving, do more of that kind of stuff. Standing positions, even for if they're doing screen time, lying down on their back, lying on their belly rather than sitting down. You know, that tablet stuff. I mean, I'm not a fan of those anyway. And my kids in Steiner school, they were encouraged not to have those devices and reduce that screen time as much as possible. So we did that as much as possible until I suppose their later years to introduce them to phones. They probably got their phones much later than their friends did, about 3 or 4 years later.
Okay, nice.
So
and did you have a few moments around?
Oh yeah. That's not fair. Why are we like, what's this? You're bloody ancient, or you're, you know, you're talking with like 10, 12-year-olds. Everybody else is, they can put a pretty good rational argument. It was hard to tell them not to, but it became, you know, that's one of the things that we needed to do eventually. We needed to have the security to know where they were. But it was also, you know, even like games and computer games, you know, I restricted and I said, Josh, you're not getting a DS or not a DS, what they call it, Xboxes and PlayStations until you get to a rep level in the sport and show you that you can commit to something. And when he got to New South Wales, I had to fork out. And
you had to fork out.
Ryan was allowed to get one too. And so the seal was broken. So once they'd achieved and shown different things that I wasn't going to be just turning them into a zombie, I felt that they had that discipline already learned to what reward and community, and, you know, they had teammates and stuff like that. So
yeah. And that sort of discipline or goal setting or being that bit of tough love is something that's somewhat lost in modern parenting for the most part, I think. And maybe something that parents are thinking about a bit more as we face the digital age and the screen-based age.
Yeah. I think it's, I mean, if, you know, the challenges we all go through, I mean, they seem to be later on in hindsight, the pressure points that made us shift, or we can look back and say, well, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have learned how to do this. So I think sometimes allowing a child to get challenged, fail, try it their way and come back and maybe ask for help or say, well, okay, I didn't know how to do that, rather than when you offer it up first, it's kind of just, okay, I know how to do it, Dad, I'm fine. And then, okay, you having challenges with it, but it's be there for the support when it's offered, not to be always, I suppose, offering it. And I suppose I get to that point where you do sometimes the modern mum, dad is supposed to be, what's the term? The hovering, the helicopter parent.
Helicopter parent, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I was more so, I suppose, left to my own devices, gave a task, you know, paint that fence, do that, cut the grass, whatever. And at the beginning, yeah, you'd ask or be shown how, but then, you know, if there was something that you had to get done, you had to work it out how to do it. And there was a consequence if you didn't. And there was a reward sometimes if you did it. So it was conditional loving, I suppose, which is not great. But it gave me some of those rules and stuff that we needed to have, I suppose, to learn the work ethic, and that you put something in, there's a reward to it. And there was a sense of achievement. And it was all, I suppose, the task that I did. I lived on a small property like I have now. So there's always a fence or something, cut grass, cut down a tree, or you're doing something, growing vegetables. So we had veggie patch at the back, and we had a pony as well, and dogs and cats. So, you know, there's always someone or something to look after. And my dad, got our house built. So building the house, we moved in at about 6, and typical kind of like, building your own house. It wasn't finished for another year and a half, So we moved in and it was still half the house was still a building site, but the rooms were closed in. And this is Ireland because it's pretty cold then. But, we learned to pitch in and work as a team and do a little bit, and finish things. And I'm also, I think, watching my kids go through certain sports organizations, everybody gets the ribbon or the medal. Yeah, that's kind of, there wasn't that hardship. And I think that some of the sports that Josh and Ryan played where they lost and then they came back and they won the next game or they lost the next game, if they didn't have any losing matches, they didn't know how to celebrate as much. So I remember one soccer team, one of the boys were on, whatever happened in the selection, that team was just really good and they just won every match, but it was too easy. They didn't even value it. And then another year where they was tired and was kind of lost a couple and they fought up to the semi-finals, got to the finals and they win. That was a much better celebration because there was some hard work. Yeah. And I think those opportunities, if everybody's still winning all the time, they need to feel that. So I suppose that's me. I'm a sports guy, so I use that. But same with art. Ryan is an actor. My oldest son is an actor. So, rehearsal, the reward of putting the time in on he did violin, he did trumpet. Josh played drums for a while. Now they do guitar. So they've always played a sport, played a musical instrument, did a bit of art. I think that's the grounding of what we chose as the schooling system of the Steiner schooling, to give them a more broader base rather than just be grounded in the science and the maths. And I suppose I had that grounding in my background, but I also was very, I suppose, arty and creative when I was younger too. So I see the value in that now later on as a business owner, being, you have to be creative in marketing campaigns or slogans or what's the next thing. It becomes more of the creativity is what's the spark that allows you to then use all the marketing, business, accountants to make the money kind of thing. So it's funny how it's come the other way a little bit because, I went to accountancy college because my dad said that you never make any money as an artist, and my portfolio was accepted to art college. So there you go,
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Life Rocks is not just a podcast. It is an education foundation centered around connecting children to the magic of nature through earth sciences. As a self-funded foundation and startup, we are constantly seeking support so that we can continue our great work. So if you feel called to donate to Life Rocks, please head down to the show notes and find the relevant donation link. We accept regular money as well as cryptocurrencies. We greatly appreciate you, our Life Rocks community. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, well, it's good to have diversity of experience and education. And I think Steiner School definitely showed me that. I've been to 4 different school systems, started in public at a rough area in Sydney, went into Steiner School from year 3 to year 8, back into public, and then finished at a Catholic college. And yeah, there's definitely different focuses in all of them and pushed me in different areas in all of them. And, in the public system, you have to rely a bit more on your grit and your resources to get through because it's tough. And, there's more bullying, there's more of a hierarchy of sort of a dominance hierarchy of like tough guys just beating down on little guys and no respect for the artist or no respect for that. As where in, say, the Catholic college, I think the values of at least, religion somewhat hold a bit more respect and accountability in the system. And then Steiner School, it's actively encouraged. It's sort of more heavily leaning on the arts, but nature as well, and the awareness Steiner had of nature. And, obviously you've chosen locations to live that are like abundant in nature, out your window right now. Sunshine Coast is a paradise.
Sure.
And North Sydney is another paradise. Were these big influences for you, like personally, about nature, or was it to do with your family, or just both? You knew it was good?
Well, if you come from the Northern Hemisphere and you have the harsh winters, and we dream of going on holidays to a tropical island.
There you go.
You work your ass off all year, save up your pennies and dollars or whatever you have to go off for 2 weeks to, sit on the beach in Spain.
Get some sunlight.
And if you do really well that year, you could maybe go a little bit further afield and get close to the equator, something really tropical, Barbados or, but we'd never have enough money to get over here.
Yeah.
So it was always at my younger age, it was like, yeah, if I ever, I'd like to change the climate, it'd be nice to live or have somewhere in the Mediterranean or warmer climate. And then, as I said, I was at 6 years of age, moved from kind of a housing estate into an acre and a half, and you get a pony. My sister got a pony, and we have a little barn, and we have field at the front, a field at the back, and you're building tree houses on your own property, and all your friends come to play in your house because you got a field and a pony and stuff. So we were then just totally outdoors, and that's Ireland all the time. And our friends had fields and bales of hay and ponies and animals and stuff, and you go play with them. So from originally around the housing estate, you'd be on skateboards and bikes. Now you're getting on ponies and running up and down and jumping off bales of hay, and you're in the trees and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of but we were in kind of suburbia, kind of. It wasn't too dense, 10, 15K, you're back in kind of normal population, and 20K, you're in the middle of the city kind of thing in Dublin. So it wasn't too far away from the major city. So what I was trying to get at, the influences were, I got in nature, and then later on in life, it seemed to be a bit of an escape. It was where I did kind of a lot of my training. Earlier on when I was younger, I was a boxer and did a bit of road running and stuff like that. And, I was always like outdoor sports, preferably rather than indoor sports. So a lot of my team sports like rugby and stuff outdoors like that. And then I did come over to Australia, 26, and got introduced to the Australian culture and people, and played rugby and really enjoyed and worked in gyms and kind of really loved the culture and the people, and just seemed to gel with the rugby guys. And that was kind of me. My culture or my life probably was heavily influenced by alcohol in that stage when I was a younger man too. And then later on at 30, when I married an Australian girl, Kathy. So we lived in Australia she lived in Ireland for a couple of years. And then we came over here, and she was from Manly, from the Northern Beaches. So that's why we always knew we went back to Sydney or Australia, we were going to be settling there somewhere in the Northern Beaches. So we ended up buying in the Northern Beaches after a couple of years. And then we stayed there for nearly 20 years, 18 years, and then just moved up here over the last year. To the Sunshine Coast. And yeah, it's just the quality of life. And yeah, we've got wild strawberries and banana tree out my back here. And I've just finished off building a new terrace, kind of cutting the mountain in 2 meters by meter by about 20 meters long beds. I feel like I should have been in the Asian hills building the terrace gardens, and they're inspiring me at the moment. I'm going, how long did it take these people to do this? So
yeah,
it's taken me weeks to build this chunk out of my mountain. My land is proper direction facing, but it's quite terrace. So it's good for irrigation, but it's taken me a while just to dig into it. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, so the tropical lifestyle, and I suppose the conditioning of living in the Northern Hemisphere from a young age. When I go home, I like to feel like I can get to the country or get to the sea, but I don't like staying in a metropolis. So if I was going on a holiday, it's not my idea to stay in a city. I'd like to stay in a suburb town and visit the city for the sightseeing kind of thing. So that's kind of like, I like to get access to be away from the hustle and bustle. But, I think that's from living it and being inside the hustle and bustle. There's many times when I did work in fitness first in corporate for a couple of years, and you felt being push. And then I had to make some career choices and lifestyle choices to reflect what I wanted to do. And that was giving up some of those kind of other things that people might get, connected to or hooked to, your salary, your position, your power, your whatever, and sacrifice for different qualities. So it's just comes down to these individual values and choices,
Sure. Yeah. So I guess, but, as a coach and as someone who's looking at the problems in the face every day, you're obviously making choices that are aligning yourself to nature, aligning your family to nature, and aligning to those values of health.
as best I can. I think everybody's on the journey. I'm no angel myself. I mean, I'm
Sure.
still learning, and I learn off other people too, and hopefully we'll learn together. Yeah, I might know and see what's going on, but that doesn't make me immune from making the same mistakes everybody else does. So yeah, we have that intention, and certainly that's my goal. And at least if I have that intention, I'm going that way, at least I can try that again and hopefully learn from the experience, whether I did something wrong or right. That's what we call the pain teacher. It's either giving you a response so you can get the right or wrong. It's kind of more confusing when you don't get any return or you don't do anything, so you never know. So the indecision. So at least if I'm getting a pain response, I probably might change my approach after a couple of times, hit my head against the wall kind of thing, and do a different angle, if that analogy works.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy. I think, yeah, people do respond to pain, unfortunately, myself included. We're all
Me too.
subject to that. Yeah. And so what are you seeing people do nowadays that maybe you've already come up against that pain teacher, but you look around and then you think, damn, I wish people knew more of this, right?
I haven't personally experienced it, but I think probably the most frustrating thing for me are the clients that have the unusual concepts around food and what food is.
Okay.
And what they think their body is built out of, and what they think you can get away with putting in your body and expect your ligaments, tendons, bones, and joints to work properly.
Yeah.
Never service it like a car or change the oil or give it some good nutrition, and then just go out the weekend and play tennis and golf and play with your kids and play netball and do whatever. But, it's like never cleaning your golf clubs or never looking after your, footy boots after a rainy day, never cleaning the muck off them. It's like, you need to look after your body too. And I've had some really interesting experience. One gentleman was a guitarist, and he went to the conservatorium for guitar and being years playing guitar, but then decided to change his eating habits and went kind of vegetarian, I think more vegan for a while, and got an RSI, repetitive stress injury, from tendinopathy. Yeah. Never had it before. Used to do 8 hours conservatory, 6 hours, sessions recording for bands and stuff like this.
Yeah.
And I said straight away, like, I have a real challenge with that. My knowledge tells me that that's what the joint is made out of, an animal product, and you're not eating that. My suspicion is this. Sure, you've got some mechanical issues. I said I could reposition your shoulder and your posture, which may take some of the stress off. But I think that's a waste of our time and effort, because you're still making it out of the raw material is wrong. So he decided to change his eating habits for a while. And then his partner was vegan, and he went back on vegetarian once the pain went away, and the pain came back. And then he came back and started taking collagen, and he worked out a negotiation to cook his food outside because his vegan girlfriend couldn't stand him cooking meat and leaving it in the fridge and all that kind of stuff. So he did that, and his pain was away. But when he went on a full vegetarian diet for a while, the pain would creep back up again. So he can go a couple of days off, a couple of days on, and blend it in between. He's found a way to manage that, but he now understands he's kind of playing with fire. I don't understand why you'd even, have a couple of days off and a couple of days on, but, he's obviously got other priorities in life. Maybe love and other things make us do amazing things sometimes. But, I would say that he learned a way to negotiate it. So when I do have a client that comes to me with a disc problem or a connective tissue problem, and I know it's possible from their habits in life, we have an interesting discussion. And sometimes, they don't want to hear that. So you get the door slammed in your face a couple of times. But from doing it for so long, it's kind of, I say, oh, sorry, my light's gone there. Hold on, I'll just try and fix that.
Oh, good.
So it's really hard when you have the raw material as a kind of a substandard. And
just on that, like, how dangerous is it for parents who they have this vegan philosophy and then they're raising children like that? Like, and I'm totally with you here on this one. It's a massive frustration.
Yeah, I think a little bit of kind of knowledge around physiology, or what the brain is made of, what the nerves are made of. Maybe even you could hit it from a different angle and say, well, what's the breast milk made of? Is that a plant product or is it an animal product? juice from a nut is not a milk.
No, it's not.
So, again, when we start to look at a mammal's milk, but is a cow a human? Does it have the same? No, a camel's milk is better, or goat's milk is closer. And then why can't the mother breastfeed? And is there other benefits from the breastfeeding action? And yes, there is. And there's other things that are the antibodies. And then the amount of fat and type of fats that are in the breast milk and what type of fats are in there. There's actually a large percentage of saturated fats of what the fat that's in there. There's other proteins in there. There's other immune systems. So I think the foods that we eat and the way that we eat, that's very challenging. The nutrition that for a developing child, it's higher in fat and protein. So going vegetarian is actually going in the reverse requirements for a growing nervous system, because the nervous system raw material is good fats, proteins, and water. So that's what it's needing. It's needing collagen. Collagen is the connective tissue that holds the ground substance and the cellular matrix together. And that elastin and relaxin that makes up the lattice work of the kind of cell, that's made up of this 12 different types of collagen, which are primarily from animal products. You're not going to find much animal collagen basically in a plant. That doesn't happen. You might find some plant collagens, but they have to be converted, broken down, and then worked on. So you can't do that. And this is where sometimes there are some kind of what they call biohacks these days, or ways to, put some pollen with this stuff here, and you have a complete complex of proteins, and that's as good as now beef. No, it's not. But yes, you can say that on a piece of paper that, but let's put it to the test. And this is where, where I've seen this multiple times with people that have gone through vegan, vegetarian, and I'm having a few now where I didn't have before, but now people are coming off and have had damages and been for a while, 5-10 years, and now found that they've gone off it and it doesn't work for them anymore. And now they've got to deal with the issue of being a vegan vegetarian and how that caused malnutrition, wear and tear, osteophytes, all sorts of interesting, wonderful things that happen when we don't fuel the body, or, you don't look after the garden. So it's the same thing. You have to kind of constantly weed and look after the garden. You have to look after your body. It's your temple thing. And I think people have lost the connection with that. That's probably the big thing with the food. And then people sitting down, like we're sitting down so much. And then the gym work, people's idea of exercise these days, I told you I've been out digging and lifting, and the last 2 years or the last year and a half been up here, building walls and, reshifting my whole commercial gym and rebuilding the shed and, doing things I used to do when I was younger, like, just, painting and plastering and gyprocking and stuff, building. It's like being really kind of, move stuff. So it's like the farmer workout, farmland workout or caveman workout. And then in the gym with the nice smooth weights and everything's balanced and everything has to be correct. But then you're out in the field and you're cutting a log and you're chiseling and you're doing stuff and you got to organize yourself. And I'm digging on a hill, like it's about 35 degrees and I'm trying to lift rocks and doing stuff. It's great. It's like complex. It's like, wow, never done this before. That's a weird lunge. That's a weird, you don't get that in the gym. So I think that's kind of, I get a lot of gym fit guys that can't do stuff and girls that can do pretty impressive looking workouts in the gym, but can't really move effectively.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. I think
because it does. I see, people running along the pavement, pushing prams and looking at their phone at the same time.
Yeah.
All this sort of stuff. So it's sort of like they're disconnecting and they're just sort of going through the motion rather than being present with the body.
One of the things we did with our boys, obviously we're in a unique situation that we've always had a clinic or a gym or a fitness facility. So mommy and daddy going to work, they're looking at us doing exercise with people. And then we go in our own workouts. And when we do our own workouts, they'd come in and play around with the stuff, or we'd give them exercises to do. And then when we would be there with friends and they were like 5, 6, 7, 8, they would make up an exercise kind of circuit or things for us to do in our rest period. So the adults kind of lift and then they take over as like drill instructors and they tell us what to do. And so that we have that attention and they feel, they're part of the team. And then they watch us And then they kind of get ideas and they're chatting and they say, what about this? And they make up something else. So they're trying to make us fall and have fun. And we're playing while we're resting.
Right.
And playing and when we're resting. So even the adults that partake in that, if we look at strength conditioning facilities around the world, the Russian and the Moscow centers, they've been doing this for years, and novel ways to, create delta gamma wave relaxation in between, and play and laughter in between aggressive forms is the quickest way to recover. So it's that positive reinforcement, that, uplifting, you did a great job, rather than the coach go, for an hour. It's only natural, right? So when you get that positive response, and that's what we're looking at. So
yeah, that's a good thing. And I think you've touched on something there, which is like parents can actually utilize their connection with their kids to stay healthy. It doesn't have to be, oh, mum's going to the gym over here whilst, the kids are in a playpen or something like this. Like, it's a bit healthier.
Yeah.
Seems a bit more natural to include them in it.
I think it's also, even like why, when you're going strolling, like, it's great the mum's getting out with the baby, and that is the baby looking at the scenery, or are you going to get the baby looking at you? Do you want them to connect to you, or do you want them to connect to the outside of the world? But nobody thinks about that when they buy the pram kind of thing, and they're imprinting stuff and kind of things like that. There are great classes, mums and babs classes, and pram classes, and, there's different exercises you could do, and, yoga things, especially like in the earlier years. As a father and as someone that's taking many clients through prenatal before they're pregnant, I had one lady in particular 3 years ago. She had a spinal issue of scoliosis, and the doctors and the medical system recommended she didn't get pregnant. She wanted to have another child, so we stabilized her spine. She went through the pregnancy, and after pregnancy for 2 years after pregnancy, we kept on training her. And her family has actually now moved up here as well. And I was doing the sessions with the baby, so it's quite interesting to see the mom through the whole process. And then even in some of the exercises, we would use the baby, that the mom would have to hold the baby while she was doing certain exercises. So I was getting the opportunity to see how the mom organized her posture and what strategies she would use around everyday life. Could we bring some of the tools that she's supposed to learn in the gym, and does it really carry over to helping her with carrying baby, 2-year-old, another baby hanging out of her hip as well, a 3 or 4-year-old running around her feet, a dog, the pram, going shopping. You can make the scenario that, you might be good at holding a bar on your back, but then put a dog in one hand, put a baby on this, put a toddler there, and try and get all the washing and shopping into the car at the same time. That's not normal. Yeah, you're not going to do that in your spin class. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to prepare you for that type of strength, stability, mobility, movement strategies. And it doesn't have to be Olympic level. I mean, that's the other thing, that people are all trying to be athletes, and the harsh reality that there's, at the high level, these certain individuals are gifted, and then they put in a tremendous amount of work. And from working with some of the top athletes that I've seen, yeah, they are gifted, but they've got this work ethic that's higher than everybody else. That's why they're better than most people, because they put the work in.
Sure. Well, Donal, it's been awesome. We've burned through that hour real quick.
Cool.
I know you're running mentorship programs at the moment up in Sunny Coast, and you still see people in person for training.
Yeah. My main, my bread and butter, I coach clients through orthopedic challenges, back problems, spinal problems, but I also have your normal training client that's, been working with a trainer, or had a neck issue or a shoulder issue that keeps coming back. And yeah, I do a lot of mentorships for then the fitness professionals. So I've, as a C.H.E.K faculty member and as a lecturer for now over 20 years and teaching, it's more now really about passing on the experience and knowledge of putting that to use over 20 years in the industry. And I was on tour for years, and I'm now kind of up on my hill here so I'm running.
Gardening.
Yeah, you have to come out and enjoy nature with me if you want to come up here. And then the sessions we do face-to-face. So a lot of mentorships are gone online, but I'm staying to the face-to-face connection group, and I find that so much better. And the 4 that we've ran now have found really beneficial, that the group that we connect, the face-to-face team, the connection that they have. So yeah, our next mentorship will start in February. Anybody that's a fitness professional practitioner working through the higher levels, been in the industry for a while, yeah, just send us a message at Place C.H.E.K or connect to us on Instagram. I think on our bio link you can
we'll put all your links in, and you're putting good stuff out on Instagram lately.
Thank you.
And I'm sure any parents or mothers or even educators who've had questions raised or want to go deeper into any of the insights around development, or even if it's prenatal work or if it's post-pregnancy work, that you'd be happy to consult with them on all of that stuff.
Yeah, I've been teaching a course in Australia now since 2007, pre and postnatal to personal trainers. So for the last 13 years or so, being really kind of deep in that and with my clients, obviously. So yeah, we specialize in prenatal, postnatal, but yeah, especially also then as an educator as well. If you're in that field and you want to learn more about that, obviously some of the references we talked about, Linda Hartley, Wisdom of the Body Moving, that's a great book to get you started on kind of understanding how infant development affects movement strategies later on in life. And then you also have Voiter's work, the DNS, and that's the Prague Institute. That's Voiter's probably the guy to look at, the granddaddy of all of it. And his work, where those practitioners, DNS practitioners, is where I bring children under 2, 3, but also adolescents or spinal issues, scoliosis, hip dysplasia, symphysis pubis issues, retraining movement strategies. And there's a few up here in the coast. There's a good few in Sydney, Melbourne. They're scattered all around, but there's pretty skilled therapists, very specialized. They're usually pretty busy.
Yeah. Well, all of that's awesome. And the more work that parents can do at the front end of their child's life, the less that they'll have to do later on in life, or go seeing therapists and stuff for the pain and postural issues. So
yep.
Thanks, Donal. It's been awesome.
Okay, anytime.
Yeah, we'll have you back on sometime.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks everybody for listening, and until next time, life rocks.
Thank you so much for listening to the Life Rocks podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then leave us a review. We'll be back soon with more inspiring content, and in the meantime, remember, life rocks.